As I was driving past my son-in-law's place one late afternoon, I figured I would swing by and check on him. But the moment I spotted my wife's car, a polished silver Lexus that was supposed to be sitting in our garage, parked right up against his gate, something inside me tightened like a pulled muscle. I felt that familiar warning in my gut, the kind that shows up before your life changes in ways you never asked for. I eased the truck to the curb and moved quietly toward the nearest window, trying to make myself invisible. What I heard drifting out through that cracked pane of glass knocked the air out of my lungs. When the old fool finally signs the papers, everything we mapped out will fall right into place. That was Margaret's voice, sharp, confident, and dripping with the kind of cruelty I never imagined she possessed. The sound of it slithered straight into my bloodstream. I froze there, half bent by the siding, unable to move. A few minutes earlier, I had been sitting in my car outside my daughter Chloe's home, the keys still hanging from the ignition, thinking about nothing more complicated than surprising her with dinner. 5 minutes before that, I had called her. "Sorry, Dad, I am not home right now, but Ethan is there finishing up some case files," she had said, cheerful as ever. Yet Margaret's Lexus was parked in the driveway like it owned the property. I shut off the engine and walked back toward the window, my legs trembling. Through a narrow slit where the curtains did not quite meet, I could see everything clearly. My wife of 25 years was sprawled out on Chloe's couch, as if it were her personal throne. And there was Ethan, my son-in-law, leaning against the bookshelf, wearing that self-satisfied smirk I had always brushed off as arrogance. "The timing is perfect," Ethan said, his attorney voice clean and professional. "We file in June, claim irreconcilable differences. With the updated Colorado statutes, Margaret is entitled to half of all marital assets, plus lifetime spousal support." Margaret laughed, this light tinkling sound I used to think was charming. "His construction company alone is worth $12 million. Add the rental units, the lake house, the investment accounts. We are talking nearly $20 million. My hands started shaking. I fumbled for my phone and hit record just as Ethan kept talking, his tone disturbingly smug. The genius of all this is how trusting he is. Richard has no idea we have already documented every asset he owns. Bank statements, property deeds, business evaluations, everything. It is all copied and organized. He nodded toward a manila folder sitting on the coffee table. He practically handed us the keys to his entire estate. Margaret lifted her hand and inspected her nails as if she were talking about a stranger instead of her husband. 25 years pretending to be the loyal spouse, sitting through his dull stories about unfinished roofing jobs, pretending to be supportive when he panicked about payroll deadlines. My God, the man genuinely believes I love him. At that exact moment, I stepped on a twig. It cracked loud enough to slice through the conversation. Both of them snapped their heads toward the window, like startled deer. I plastered myself against the cold brick wall, my heartbeat pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Sweat trickled down my spine, despite the chilly evening. "Did you hear something?" Margaret asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Probably the neighbor's cat," Ethan muttered after a second. "You worry too much." "Can you blame me? If Richard got wind of this before we are prepared—" "He will not," Ethan cut in. "The man would not recognize a conspiracy even if someone taped a neon sign to it." His laugh carried nothing but contempt. "By September, you will be divorced, wealthy, and completely free to live exactly how you want with whoever you choose." I stayed hidden until they eased back into conversation, and my phone recorded every poisonous word that fell from their mouths. When I finally crept back to my car about 15 minutes later, it felt as though someone had rotated the entire world by a few degrees. 25 years of marriage, boiled down to a strategy session between my wife and the man who married my daughter. That folder on the table would not leave my mind. Months of planning, weeks of collecting documents, all while I was pulling 16-hour days to build a future I assumed we shared. They had been planning how to dismantle it. I climbed into the driver's seat and stared at my hands gripping the steering wheel. These were the same hands that had built a construction company from nothing, that had bought Margaret every comfort she had ever wanted, and the same hands that walked her down the aisle when her own father refused to attend our wedding. Her voice echoed through my skull. The man actually believes I love him. The hardest part was realizing that up until half an hour ago, I truly did. Just as I reached for the keys, the front door swung open. Margaret walked out first, her designer purse swinging by her side with carefree confidence, and Ethan followed close behind, adjusting his tie like he had just wrapped up a business meeting. They both froze when they saw me sitting there in my old Ford. The shock on Margaret's face cracked through her polished mask. "Richard?" she blurted, her voice shooting up a whole octave. "What are you doing here?" I forced my face into something neutral, even though my pulse was hammering. After 25 years, I thought I knew her moods. Turns out, she had been acting the whole damn time. "I just wrapped up an inspection at a job site nearby," I said, keeping my tone steady as I stepped out of the car. "Thought I would stop in and see Chloe." Ethan immediately stepped slightly in front of Margaret, like he was shielding her. His pale gray eyes scanned my face, searching for any sign that I had heard them. "She is not here." Margaret jumped in right away. I was helping Ethan organize some documents for one of his clients." The lie rolled out of her mouth smooth as silk, and all I could think was, how many lies have I swallowed over the past 25 years without ever noticing? I kept my tone easy and casual, acting as though nothing at all was out of place. "I thought you would be at the office until 6 this evening," I said lightly. "Did you not mention something about reviewing the Dawson proposal this morning?" For the briefest moment, panic flickered across her face, quick, sharp, unmistakable. "I left early," she replied. "I had a headache." "I am sorry to hear that," I said, before turning toward Ethan with a smile I had to force. "Working on anything interesting today?" "Asset division," he answered reflexively, then immediately checked himself. "For a divorce case, complicated financial structure." If the situation had not been actively dismantling my life, the irony might have been almost comedic. Margaret glanced between the two of us, her eyes moving rapidly as she calculated something behind them. "How long have you been here, Richard?" "Just pulled up," I said smoothly. "Why?" "No reason," she replied, though the smile she tried to summon looked artificial, painted on. "You seem tense. Everything all right?" The woman who had been orchestrating my financial destruction for months was asking whether I was okay. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. "Long day," I said instead. "You know how that goes?" I gave a slight nod toward Ethan. "Do not let me interrupt your work session." "We were just finishing," Ethan said, as he placed his hand on the small of Margaret's back. It was a natural motion. Too natural, too familiar. That kind of touch does not come from business meetings or friendly conversations. My stomach tightened. "Good timing then," I said, pulling out my phone and checking the time, making sure the screen was clearly visible. They did not react outwardly, but I noticed Ethan's gaze linger on the device a beat longer than necessary. "I should get going anyway," I added. "Dinner does not cook itself." Margaret let out a laugh that sounded forced and overly bright. "I will be home soon. I just need a few minutes to wrap things up here. Take your time." I opened the car door, then paused as if something had just occurred to me. "Oh, and Margaret, Dr. Sanders' office called about rescheduling your physical. Something about a conflict with your work calendar." Her face blanked for a fraction of a second, the expression of someone whose lie has been seen too clearly. Then she recovered with her usual practiced grace. "That must be a mistake," she said quickly. "I will call them back later." "No worries," I replied. "These things happen." I slid into the driver's seat, my heart pounding in a steady, merciless rhythm. "See you both later." As I backed down the driveway, I watched them in the mirror. They stayed perfectly still until my car turned onto the main road. Then they stepped closer, their heads leaning in toward each other, their conversation shifting into something tense and urgent. The triangle of deception was complete. They suspected I might have overheard something. I knew they were preparing to dismantle my life, and all three of us were maintaining the flimsy illusion that everything remained perfectly normal. Margaret would drive home separately, armed with explanations about her early departure, a sudden headache, and whatever fictional reason she would manufacture for being at Ethan's house. By the time she walked through the front door, she would have prepared half a dozen polished justifications. But she had no idea that inside my phone sat 43 minutes of crisp, irrefutable audio, every sentence that sealed their downfall. As I merged into traffic, my hand steadied for the first time in almost an hour. The shock had finally begun to settle, replaced by something colder, sharper, and far more focused. They believed they were playing a sophisticated game against someone who barely understood the rules. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The 15-minute trip home passed by in a haze of familiar streets and shifting traffic lights. My old Ford rolled into the circular driveway, as though it knew the path without my direction, passing the garden Margaret always hired crews to maintain, and the ornate fountain she insisted on installing for our 20th anniversary. I stayed in the car for several minutes, staring at the house I had built myself back in 1995. Every board, every nail, every design choice had been crafted with love and intention. The place had been my gift to her, a physical representation of the future I believed we shared. Now, it stood as a monument to my own blindness. Inside, the silence felt different, not restful, but empty. Margaret's presence had always filled these rooms. Her updates about her day, her complaints about neighbors, her excitement about purchases I never cared about. I began to wonder how much of that had been genuine and how much had been part of a performance meant to maintain her image. A photograph on the mantel caught my eye first. Our wedding picture. November 12th, 1988. Margaret glowed in an ivory dress, and I stood next to her in a tuxedo I could barely afford, both of us appearing as though the world had opened itself to us. She had been 22 then, working as a receptionist at a law firm downtown. I was 37, finally seeing real profit after a decade of 12-hour days and cheap takeout meals. We met at the company holiday party that year. Foster and Caldwell, the firm she worked for, had hired my company to renovate their suite earlier that fall. I had cracked some terrible joke about concrete trucks, and she had laughed with a sound like small bells. When I asked her out, she blushed and said yes, so quickly it startled me. Our first date at Angelo's Italian Bistro lasted until after midnight. She leaned forward, hanging on every word as I talked about my dream of building something meaningful, homes that families would grow in, spaces that would last longer than either of us. She touched my hand across the table and said, "You are not just building structures, you are building lives." I proposed half a year later. Sitting on the kitchen table now was our 25th anniversary card from last winter, Margaret's elegant handwriting still flowing across the front in blue ink. To my dearest husband, thank you for making every one of my dreams come true. Here is to another 25 years of joy. All my love, Margaret. All her love. The words tasted sour now, like something spoiled. I walked into the living room, stopping in front of the shelves I had built by hand while Lauren was pregnant. Each one still held framed pictures of our daughter, snapshots of a life I used to believe was built on sincerity. June 8th, 1995, the day Lauren gave birth to our little girl. She looked exhausted, but there was a glow about her as she held that wrinkled newborn against her chest. In those early years, I truly thought we had created something beautiful. Lauren threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she once used to plan our wedding. She managed every school function, every soccer season, every theme birthday party with a level of enthusiasm that left me awed. She captured every milestone with a pride that seemed so genuine it warmed me to my core. "You are the best father any girl could ask for," she whispered to me the night Ellie graduated high school, tears rolling down her cheeks as we watched our daughter accept her diploma. "She is going to do extraordinary things because of the foundation you gave her. The foundation I gave her, not we." Had the cracks already begun to show back then? I sank into my old leather recliner, the same one Lauren always said ruined the aesthetic of the formal living room, and let decades of memories wash over me. Our 10th anniversary cruise to Alaska, where Lauren seemed genuinely enchanted by the glaciers and endless wildlife. Ellie's college graduation, all three of us crying with pride as she strode across that stage with her degree in psychology. Christmas mornings thick with laughter, ribbons, and the elaborate decorations Lauren insisted on installing every year. When exactly had gratitude shifted into entitlement? When had "thank you for this life" quietly morphed into "we deserve much more"? My phone held the answer. The recording proved what I had not been willing to see. Lauren had not loved me in years, maybe not in decades. Every affectionate gesture, every whispered "I love you," every anniversary getaway had been part of a controlled performance, a tactic to keep me building, earning, creating wealth she planned to claim piece by piece. 25 years of my devotion reduced to one strategic planning session. As night settled across the living room, a colder, more analytical part of me began to surface. Lauren believed she was orchestrating a slow, careful endgame, maneuvering herself into the strongest financial position possible while keeping her hands clean. She had absolutely no idea that the same strategic instincts that built a construction powerhouse from the ground up were still alive in me, and that I was already adapting. The silence of the room wrapped around me as I mentally shifted into the businessman I used to be, the one who had weathered recessions, labor strikes, permit delays, and budget battles without blinking. I forced myself to consider the question objectively. When had Lauren stopped acting like an equal partner and started behaving like a tactician? The moment came back with painful clarity. It was 2020, the year Cole Construction secured the contract for the Ridgeline Civic Complex. $50 million spread over 3 years, the largest project we had ever won. I had walked through the door that April evening expecting celebration, maybe champagne, definitely pride. Instead, Lauren sat at the kitchen table with a luxury real estate catalog and a calculator. "This means we can finally move into the house on Maple Ridge," she announced without even looking up. "You know, the one with the circular drive and the pool? The Reynolds family listed it for $4.2 million. No congratulations, no acknowledgement of the workforce that project would support, no interest in the achievement itself, just immediate calculation of what my success could buy her." "Lauren, I have not even started the project," I said. "We still have architectural plans, permits, subcontractor bids." "But the money is guaranteed once you sign, right?" she interrupted, finally glancing up. Her green eyes carried a sharp, appraising look I had never noticed before. "The city has to pay." That conversation stretched nearly 2 hours. She mapped out expenses with exact numbers: new house, country club dues, luxury vehicles, upscale vacations. And it became clear that she did not say our expenses, she said hers. I had missed the shift in pronouns because I was focused on logistics and deadlines, not on the fact that my wife had begun treating my accomplishments like her personal entitlement. By 2021, the pressure had escalated. The country club membership went from an idea to a demand the moment the Whitakers joined Summit Crest Country Club. Our perfectly fine lake cabin in Michigan became embarrassing compared to the Walkers' home in Vail. Lauren started mentioning other husbands who really understood how to take care of a woman. Our physical intimacy faded gradually, so slowly that I blamed age, workload, anything but the truth. Separate bedrooms became necessary because of my supposed snoring, though she had never once complained about it in 23 years. Dinner talks changed too. They shifted from the details of our days to Lauren's assessments of other families, what they owned, what they upgraded, what they flaunted. "Emma Stewart's husband bought her a Mercedes for their anniversary," she remarked just last month, slicing her salmon with practiced precision. "All because he truly appreciated the sacrifices she made for their marriage." The implication had hung in the air like smoke. Sacrificed. That was the word she used, as if living in comfort while I worked myself into exhaustion counted as some sort of heroic personal loss. Her friendship with Ethan had intensified noticeably after Ellie's wedding in September 2023. Practically overnight, Lauren had developed a sudden fascination with legal issues, asking Ethan hypothetical questions about property division, spousal rights, and how certain laws might apply to a friend who was supposedly in a difficult marriage. She began taking phone calls in the other room, claiming they were from her book club or volunteer committees. Now I knew exactly what those calls had really been. I took out my phone and replayed parts of the recording from earlier that day. Ethan's voice came through with crisp clarity. "We have been documenting his assets for months." Then Lauren's laugh, light, cruel, familiar. 25 years of playing the devoted wife. Piece by piece, the odd behavior of the past year snapped into place. Her sudden interest in my monthly financial reports, her questions about company valuations, her insistence that we merge our checking accounts while she quietly maintained her own separate credit cards. She had been gathering intel while I was expanding the very empire she intended to carve apart. But Lauren had made one significant miscalculation. She underestimated the man she married. I did not build Cole Construction from a single-used pickup truck and a borrowed toolbox by being naive. The same analytical discipline that carried me through 35 years of multi-million-dollar projects, labor negotiations, and municipal contracts was now being redirected toward an entirely different kind of problem. They thought they were masterminds playing a high-level game. They assumed I was the fool who did not even know the rules. Lauren had been positioning her pieces for months under the assumption I was not even looking at the board. She was about to realize that her husband had always understood strategy far better than she imagined. I rose from the recliner and headed down the hall to my home office. The built-in shelves, another project from my early years, held decades of records, tax filings, partnership agreements, property deeds, and contracts. All the same documents Lauren and Ethan believed they were secretly compiling. But I knew something they did not. The real assets were not stored in those files. I reached for my phone again and scrolled until I found the contact I needed. Marcus Webb, my accountant for nearly 20 years, one of the very few people I trusted, and the only man who knew about the offshore accounts I had created years ago for perfectly legal tax efficiency purposes. It was time to make a call that would alter everything. 3 days of focused, almost clinical research transformed my office into a war room. 2 laptops hummed on the mahogany desk I built 15 years earlier, their screens filled with bank statements, legal databases, and property records. Yellow legal pads were scattered across every flat surface, each covered in neatly labeled columns: assets, weaknesses, timeline, leverage points. That morning, I had taken the time to shave, put on my best navy suit, and slide on the reading glasses Lauren always said made me look distinguished. Strange how grief, once it stopped burning, could harden into strategy, especially when you had decades of business experience to lean on. Marcus proved far more helpful than I anticipated. Together, we went through every account I had ever established, including 3 offshore holdings I had legally opened more than a decade ago, fully documented, fully compliant, and completely invisible to anyone who lacked advanced forensic accounting skill. Lauren's amateur recon had never come close to uncovering them. She had been busy cataloging the visible kingdom while the crown jewels sat untouched, but she had not been idle either. Her credit card statements told a far more revealing story. Over 8 months, she had transferred $47,000 without authorization into a joint savings account I never created. The listed beneficiary nearly made me crush the phone in my hand: Daniel Thompson. They had begun aligning themselves financially long before their official plan to dismantle my life. There were luxury lunches at Summit Crest Country Club, spa treatments priced in the hundreds, designer clothing purchases scheduled on the same days she claimed she had book club meetings. Each transaction painted the picture of a woman preparing for a different future, one she never intended me to be part of. The $8,500 handbag she bought last Tuesday carried a special sting, considering she had lectured me about grocery expenses earlier that morning. As for Ethan, his weaknesses were even more useful. Through industry contacts, I gathered a detailed portrait of the man who intended to strip me of my life's work. Far from being a model attorney, he was drowning in obligations, nearly $180,000 in student loans, and $8,500 per month office lease chosen purely for appearances, and a growing reputation for bending ethical boundaries whenever cash flow got tight. Thompson is sharp, Jim Caldwell from Caldwell Masonry told me over coffee, but the guy has champagne taste on a beer budget. Last I heard, he owes 3 of my subcontractors close to $25,000 total. Perfect. Vulnerabilities everywhere, and all of them would soon matter. He always promises to pay the following week and then disappears the moment the invoices come due. The State Bar Association's website confirmed even more: 2 ethical complaints filed against him within the past year, both dismissed but officially recorded. Anyone who understands how legal reputations work knows that even unsuccessful complaints leave shadows that never fully disappear. I leaned back in my worn leather office chair, surveying everything I had gathered during 72 hours of methodical investigation. Lauren and Ethan had catastrophically underestimated their target. They saw a trusting husband who spent long days on job sites and rarely questioned the flow of household expenses. What they failed to recognize was the strategic mind that had transformed coal construction from a single truck and a borrowed toolbox into a $12 million enterprise. My phone rang, snapping me out of my analysis. Ellie's name lit up the screen. "Hi, honey," I said, keeping my voice warm and steady. "How is your day going?" "Dad, I need to ask you something." Her tone had that calm, measured quality she used with her clients, the tone she saved for serious situations. "Is everything okay between you and Mom? There's been this strange tension lately whenever the 2 of you are in the same room." My grip on the phone tightened. How much had she noticed? How much had Ethan hinted at? Had they pulled her into any part of their plot? What makes you ask that? I said carefully. Little things, she replied. Mom seems stressed about money, which makes no sense because your business is doing so well. And Ethan keeps asking me questions about your company structure, like how your partnerships work, who owns different assets, things I have never heard him talk about before. She hesitated. It feels like they are fishing for information, but I cannot figure out why. Fishing for information? Even without knowing the truth, my daughter's training in psychology had picked up on predatory behavior her mother and husband thought they were hiding. Probably just curiosity about the business world, I said, maintaining the calmest tone I could. Your mother has always had an interest in financial security. Maybe, Ellie said, though her voice held doubt. Dad, if something was wrong, really wrong, you would tell me, right? The question hung between us like a loaded gun. Tell her what? That her mother was planning to financially cripple me? That her husband was orchestrating the entire operation? That the family she trusted was rotting from the inside out? Of course, sweetheart, I said gently. But everything is fine. Just the usual business stresses. After we ended the call, I sat motionless, staring at my notes. Ethan had been probing Ellie for intelligence on my business structure. Their information-gathering operation had a wider scope than I had realized, which meant it was time to make sure they received only the information I wanted them to believe. I was still processing Ellie's warning when my secure office line rang. Sarah Chen, my accountant for 12 years, spoke in her crisp, no-nonsense tone. Richard, I have the asset protection documents ready for your signature. When you mentioned wanting to update your estate plan, I took the liberty of researching optimal structures. She paused. This is about more than estate planning, is it not? How perceptive of you, I said. 28 years in forensic accounting teaches you to read between the lines. Should I ask what kind of threat we are protecting against? The domestic kind. Silence. Sarah knew exactly what that meant. She had guided several of my supervisors through difficult divorces. She understood the terrain. I will have everything prepared by noon, she said. Once executed, the business assets will be entirely insulated from any personal legal actions. Whoever is targeting your finances will not even know where the real holdings are. By 10 o'clock the next morning, I was seated across from Tom Bradley, president of First National Bank and my golf partner for 15 years. The mahogany conference room, with its leather chairs and the faint scent of fresh coffee, felt like familiar territory. This was where I had negotiated loan packages that shaped entire neighborhoods. Account security review, I said, sliding a folder across the glossy table. I need every joint access point verified and temporarily frozen until identity is confirmed. Tom raised an eyebrow. This is extensive, Richard. Every joint account, every credit line, every automated payment system. Everyone, I said. May I ask? You may not, I said, though I offered a polite smile to soften it. How quickly can these holds be activated? Immediately upon your signature, he said. All account holders will be notified that continued access requires an in-person visit with photo identification and secondary documentation. He studied my expression. This is going to inconvenience Lauren quite a bit. I am counting on it. The security measures took effect at 11:47 a.m., right as Lauren settled in for her weekly lunch at Summit Crest Country Club with several other construction wives. At 12:03 p.m., my phone buzzed with the first decline transaction notification. I was reviewing subcontractor bids when her panicked call came in at 12:15. Richard, something is wrong with our accounts, she blurted. My card was declined at lunch, and when I called the bank, they said there is a security hold. Do you know anything about this? Perfect innocence. She never mentioned the joint account with Ethan's name attached to it. Not a word about the missing $47,000. No acknowledgement whatsoever that she had been moving money behind my back. Security hold? That sounds serious, I said calmly. Did they tell you what caused it? Something about verifying identity and account access, she replied, her frustration rising. It is humiliating, Richard. I am sitting here with Linda and Susan and Janet, and I cannot even pay for my own lunch. Her distress was real, but not because her scheme had begun to unravel. She was upset because her carefully curated social image had taken a public hit. After 25 years of marriage, I understood exactly what mattered most to Lauren. I will call Tom Bradley right away, I assured her. We will sort this out. But I did not call Tom. Instead, I drove to the construction site where my crew was pouring the foundation for the new medical center. The rumble of machinery, the shouts between workers, the familiar scent of fresh concrete, those things grounded me in a way I desperately needed after 3 days spent waging quiet financial warfare. Throughout the afternoon, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Lauren, 1:47 p.m., still no access to any accounts. This is absurd. Lauren, 2:23 p.m., Tom Bradley's secretary says he is in meetings all day. What kind of bank president ignores his best customers? Lauren, 3:15 p.m. Even the emergency credit line is frozen. How am I supposed to buy groceries? Each message carried a grim, cold satisfaction. For decades, she had enjoyed automatic financial security while I pulled 60-hour weeks to provide it. Now she was tasting what it felt like when that security disappeared without warning. Ethan's reaction proved even more revealing. At 4:30 p.m., my private investigator, Mike Rodriguez, called with an update. Thompson tried accessing his shared account with your wife 3 separate times today, Mike reported. When that failed, he attempted to pull money from what looks like a trust account, probably your daughter's education fund he manages. That is frozen too, per your instructions. What was his reaction? I asked. Agitated, angry calls to bank staff, threats of legal action, demands to speak with management. Classic overconfident attorney realizing his leverage just vanished. By 6 p.m., I was back home, reviewing the day's battlefield from the desk in my office. Every shared account, locked. Every joint line of credit, suspended. Every automatic payment, now requiring my personal approval. Lauren's access to 25 years of accumulated wealth had been reduced to whatever cash remained in her purse. All of it was perfectly legal. A husband tightening controls while updating estate planning. Tom Bradley would confirm that standard procedures were followed meticulously. But Lauren and Ethan would hear the message behind the action. The man they intended to ambush was no longer standing still. At 6:47 p.m., my phone lit up with Lauren's number. I knew before answering that desperation, not manipulation, would be waiting on the other end. Conspirators often turn on each other once the ground begins to shake beneath their feet. Meanwhile, the after-hours security guard at Thompson & Associates barely looked up when Lauren rushed through the building's lobby at 7:15 p.m., her heels striking the marble floor with frantic urgency. I knew this because Mike had stationed himself at the coffee shop across the street, watching the entrance with a clear line of sight. The call she had made from our driveway. Ethan, we need to talk right now. Something is terribly wrong. Had been loud enough for the neighbor to overhear. At that point, Lauren no longer cared about secrecy. Up on the 14th floor, Ethan's corner office glowed like a crisis command center. Through the large windows, anyone with binoculars could see the two of them bent over a conference table covered in paperwork, their posture tense, their movements sharp. He knows, Lauren said, her voice echoing through the aging ventilation system and drifting into the accounting firm next door, where one of Mike's contacts had an office. Richard knows something, and he is cutting us off from everything? I could not even buy gas. Ethan's response came in his clipped litigation tone. The timing is not random. 3 days ago, you said he appeared at Ellie's house exactly when we were discussing strategy. He must have overheard some part of it. How much could he have heard? Lauren whispered. Enough to realize we are being serious, Ethan replied. Papers shuffled. Lauren, we have to assume he recorded that conversation. Everything we discussed, assets, timelines, strategy, it may all be documented. Silence followed, heavy, suffocating, the sound of two people finally recognizing the trap they had walked into, with confidence they never deserved. What do we do now? Lauren's voice trembled, stripped of its usual command. We accelerate, Ethan said. No more slow setup, no more careful staging. First thing Monday morning, I file for emergency divorce proceedings, with immediate spousal support. We will claim Richard is engaging in financial abuse by limiting your access to marital assets. Financial abuse? Lauren repeated, her tone sharpening with interest. That sounds legally persuasive, Ethan finished. We portray him as a controlling husband who weaponizes money to intimidate and manipulate you. The frozen accounts become evidence of a long-standing abusive pattern, not a defensive measure. I heard the shuffling of papers, the distinct sound of a lawyer slipping fully into combat mode. I will need you to document instances of emotional abuse, financial control, intimidation, he continued. Think back over your marriage. Anytime Richard made a financial decision without consulting you, anytime he questioned your spending, any moment he used money to influence your actions. That is going to be difficult, Ethan. Richard has never been controlling with money. If anything, he has been overly generous. Then generosity becomes manipulation, he replied smoothly. His providing for you becomes proof that he engineered financial dependency. Every vacation, every gift, every comfort becomes evidence of a systematic isolation strategy. The sheer audacity of it was astonishing. They were preparing to twist 25 years of devotion, sacrifice, and support into an elaborate portrait of abuse. "What about Ellie?" Lauren asked quietly. "She will not automatically take my side. Her training makes her analyze everything." "That works to our advantage," Ethan said, his voice tightening with strategic enthusiasm. Her hesitation becomes evidence of how deeply Richard has manipulated family dynamics. We frame her professional background as something he exploited to turn his own daughter against her mother's emotional needs. "You want our daughter to testify against her father?" Lauren asked, startled. "I want to secure your financial future," he countered. Ellie's professional credibility gives her testimony enormous weight. If she expresses even mild concern about family interactions, we frame it as expert psychological analysis confirming Richard's manipulative patterns. The strategy was breathtaking in its cruelty. Turn the daughter's intellect into a weapon, twist love into manipulation, and transform defensive asset protection into supposed proof of abuse. "Monday morning," Ethan continued confidently, "I file for emergency restraining orders to prevent further asset movement, temporary spousal support of $15,000 per month, and immediate exclusive occupancy of the marital home. By midweek, the narrative will portray him as an abusive, controlling husband requiring judicial oversight." "And if he pushes back?" Lauren asked. "Then we escalate. Harassment claims if he contacts you directly, stalking accusations if he tries to gather information, emotional abuse allegations if he challenges any part of your story." Ethan's tone cooled further. The beauty of domestic abuse law is that denial becomes its own form of evidence. The more he fights, the more controlling he appears. Lauren let out a laugh devoid of warmth. "Poor Richard. He has no idea what he has started." 25 years of being the loyal, trusting husband," Ethan said. "Time to teach him that nice guys finish last." For the next hour, they refined their script, aligning their stories, setting up secure communication channels, and preparing what Ethan proudly called total legal warfare. Their conspiracy had grown beyond financial theft. It had evolved into a full-scale plan to annihilate Richard's finances, destroy his reputation, fracture his relationship with his daughter, and tarnish the public image he had built over 3 decades. Lauren left the office at 9:30 p.m., her phone already vibrating with Ethan's first tactical message. "Remember, you are not an angry wife anymore. You are a frightened victim, finally finding the courage to escape your abuser." The war had officially begun. Saturday morning, Lauren and Ellie arrived at Cafe Serafina, the small bistro where they had shared monthly mother-daughter brunches for years. Lauren had selected their usual corner table, private, shielded from view, ideal for conversations that needed to stay confidential. But she was not here in her role as Ellie's mother. She was positioning herself as a woman seeking her daughter's professional guidance. "Ellie, I need to talk to you about your father," she began, her voice carefully infused with trembling vulnerability. I think something is wrong with him mentally." Ellie set down her latte with the same deliberate precision she used during therapy sessions. Her posture shifted, signaling that she recognized the emotional weight of the statement. "What kind of wrong, Mom?" "Controlling behaviors, paranoid thinking," Lauren said softly. "He has been restricting my access to our accounts. He says it is for security reasons, but—" Lauren let her voice fade into a trembling pause, inviting her daughter's mind to fill the silence with imagined danger. "How long has this been happening?" Ellie asked. "Months, maybe longer. I assumed it was just work-related stress," Lauren said, layering her tone with wounded confusion. "But yesterday, he locked me out of every account we share. I could not even pay for lunch." Ellie leaned forward, her professional training kicking in, despite the personal stakes. "Mom, financial control can absolutely be a form of domestic abuse, but but it can also be legitimate financial management during business restructuring or legal issues. What reason did Dad give you? The question was too precise, too clinical. Lauren had been expecting sympathy, not an impartial evaluation. He claims it is routine account security, she said. But, Ellie, I have been married to him for 25 years. This is not routine. This is punishment. Punishment for what? Ellie asked carefully. Lauren hesitated. She could not risk veering too close to the truth, not without exposing her entire conspiracy. I think he suspects I have been questioning our marriage, she said finally. Maybe he is trying to scare me into staying. Mom? Ellie's voice softened into the tone she used for manipulative patience. Are you telling me Dad is financially abusing you to prevent a divorce? Or are you telling me you are considering divorce and Dad is protecting assets? The distinction cut straight to the reality Lauren was trying to bury. She shifted tactics instantly. I am telling you your father has been acting strangely, and as a psychologist, I thought you might offer insight into what is going on. As a psychologist, Ellie replied, calm and measured, I can tell you that major behavioral shifts usually have identifiable triggers. What happened 3 days ago that might have prompted him to restrict access? Lauren's mind scrambled. Ellie was too well trained to fall for unsubstantiated narratives. Each question illuminated another gap in Lauren's carefully curated victim persona. I do not know why he did it, she said finally. That is what frightens me. But Ellie was watching her mother with the cool detachment of a clinician. Her eyes tracked micro-expressions, inconsistencies, pauses, every subtle tell. Mom, she said slowly, are you asking for psychological guidance, or are you asking me to take sides in a marital conflict? The question cracked Lauren's strategy in half. Ellie was not going to offer emotional validation. She was dissecting the claim for accuracy. I am asking you to help me understand what is happening to our family, Lauren said, trying to regain control. Then my advice, Ellie said gently but firmly, is to talk honestly with Dad about his concerns, rather than asking me to psychoanalyze him through your interpretation of events. Lauren left the cafe 20 minutes later, furious that Ellie refused to endorse her narrative and deeply unsettled. Without her daughter's automatic support, the terrified victim persona became dangerously unstable. Meanwhile, 40 miles away at Cole Construction headquarters, I was receiving information that shifted the entire war. At 10:15 a.m., Jim Caldwell called as I reviewed weekend site reports. Richard, I figured you would want a heads up, Jim said. Word around the industry is that Ethan Thompson is in trouble with the state bar. They are investigating his handling of contractor payments from the Mitchell case. My grip tightened around my coffee mug. What kind of trouble? 3 subcontractors filed complaints. Thompson collected payment from his client months ago, but never distributed the funds. If they can prove it, that is a classic trust account violation. I set my coffee down, mind already calculating the strategic implications. How serious is the investigation? Serious enough that the bar scheduled a hearing for next week. Thompson is scrambling to come up with $23,000 to make everyone whole before things escalate. $23,000, the exact figure I had uncovered through my own research. Jim, I asked, would those subcontractors be willing to talk if someone from the construction community reached out? Absolutely. They are furious. Thompson kept promising payment for 6 months. Always had some excuse or blamed court delays. These guys run small operations. They cannot absorb that kind of loss. The next 3 hours became a masterclass in strategic networking. I called Bob Martinez at Martinez Electrical, waiting 8 months for $7,400. Then Steve Chen of Chen Plumbing, owed $9,200 since last October. And finally, Randy Foster at Foster Roofing, still unpaid $6,500 from a job nearly a year old. Every call followed the same approach. Professional courtesy from Cole Construction, inquiring about Thompson's reliability before potentially hiring him for legal work. Each contractor eagerly described the same pattern. Ethan using client trust accounts like personal cash flow, dodging calls, providing vague excuses, and stretching payment timelines well beyond ethical standards. By 1 p.m., I had documented concrete evidence of a consistent pattern of misconduct, violations that could end Ethan's legal career. At 2:30 p.m., I dialed the State Bar Association's ethics hotline. I would like to file a formal complaint regarding attorney misconduct, I said, and the war reached a new stage. I would like to file a formal complaint, I told the intake specialist. Attorney Daniel Thompson has demonstrated a repeated pattern of mishandling client trust accounts and has misrepresented payment timelines to multiple construction professionals. The complaint form required detailed documentation. I included everything: contractor names, exact amounts, owed, dates of promised payments, a timeline of his misrepresentations, and evidence showing that Ethan had systematically diverted or withheld client funds for personal use. 3 more subcontractors agreed to serve as witnesses if necessary. By 4 p.m., calls from the State Bar Association were flooding Ethan's office. Questions about expedited investigation protocols, mandatory hearing attendance, and required documentation. His professional reputation, the very foundation of his scheme, had been placed under formal ethical review. At 4:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Mike Rodriguez. Thompson just left his office carrying 3 boxes of files, heading toward his car. Want me to follow? No need, I typed back. I know exactly where he's going. Of course he was heading to Lauren. Panic would override any strategic instincts he thought he had. Their once confident conspiracy was about to collapse into frantic improvisation. Let them panic. Let them rush. Mistakes were inevitable when fear dictated their decisions. The real war was just beginning. 2 days of watching her mother's behavior shift and hearing Ethan's offhand questions about my business had given Ellie time to process more than she wanted to admit. Driving to Cole Construction that Monday morning felt for her like approaching a crossroads she had avoided her entire adult life. The headquarters rose against the pale April sky, all brick and steel and craftsmanship. It looked solid, honest, everything Ethan's glass office tower pretended to be. Sarah, my secretary for 8 years, greeted Ellie with genuine warmth. Ellie had been at company picnics, barbecues, job site tours. She was family. He's expecting you, honey. Go right in. I stood as she entered, reading her posture with practiced sensitivity. Not the way I studied Lauren's moods for survival, but as a father reading his daughter's resolve. Ellie carried herself differently now, straight-backed, steady, clinical. She looked like someone who had made decisions, not someone searching for guidance. Dad, she said, taking a seat across from me, we need to discuss what is happening between you and Mom. Her voice held that calm neutrality she used with volatile patience. I have spent the past 2 days analyzing the situation, and I need to understand your perspective. What has your mother told you? I asked. That you are showing signs of controlling behavior, financial manipulation, possibly emotional abuse. Ellie folded her hands with deliberate precision. She asked me to support her claim and use my professional credentials to bolster her position. Hearing my daughter speak in clinical terminology about my marriage was unsettling, but I recognized her approach immediately. She was establishing emotional distance to evaluate the facts. And what do you think? I asked quietly. I think Mom tried to manipulate me the same way she has apparently been manipulating you. Ellie's green eyes, so similar to Lauren's, yet clearer and steadier, searched my face. Show me the evidence, Dad. I want to hear exactly what you heard. I hesitated. Once she listened to the recording, there would be no unlearning the truth about her mother and husband. But Ellie was 30 now, a licensed psychologist with years of experience handling painful truths. She could handle this. I pressed play. Lauren's voice filled the office. When the old fool finally signs the papers, we will have everything we planned for. Ellie did not react at first. Her face remained composed, her expression carefully neutral, as she listened to her mother dismantle 25 years of marriage with icy ease. She heard Ethan's strategic calculations, their cold planning around timelines, financial extractions, and divorce tactics. But when Lauren said, 25 years of playing the devoted wife, Ellie's composure faltered, only slightly, but enough. Her hands tightened once, then slowly relaxed. When the audio ended, silence expanded between us like a vast chasm. How long have you known? She asked finally. 6 days, I answered. I overheard the conversation at your house last Tuesday. And since then, what? She gestured to the notes on my desk. You have been mounting a defense while pretending everything was normal. Something like that, I said. She exhaled slowly. Mom asked me to evaluate your mental state. She wanted me to provide a professional opinion that you were showing abusive patterns. What did you tell her? I asked. That I cannot ethically diagnose someone I have not evaluated, and that her claims did not fit your established behavioral patterns. Her voice sharpened with anger. She tried to weaponize my education, Dad. She tried to turn my training into ammunition against you. The betrayal, hers and mine, lay thick in the air. I am sorry you were dragged into this, sweetheart, I said softly. I am not, she replied, her tone clear and resolute. I am glad I know the truth. The real question is, what happens now? I studied her face, seeing the strength she had built without knowing she would need it today. That is your choice, Ellie. I will never ask you to choose sides. I already have, she said quietly. And she stood. I choose truth over family loyalty, Ellie said firmly. I choose evidence over emotion. And I choose the parent who did not try to manipulate my professional ethics. A wave of relief washed through me, immediately followed by concern. What about Ethan? I asked quietly. Her expression hardened. What about him? My husband participated in a scheme to financially destroy my father while using my psychology credentials as camouflage. That marriage is over. Ellie, Dad, I am not acting out of anger, she said, her voice steady. I am making a decision based on character assessment and observable behavior. She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. I will testify truthfully about our family dynamic if it becomes necessary, but I will not be anyone's weapon, including yours. I understand, I said. Good, because there is something else I need to do. She left my office with the sure stride of someone who had located her own integrity and was unwilling to compromise it any longer. 20 minutes later, she would be standing inside her own home, confronting the man who had betrayed her trust, her profession, and her family. I sat alone in my office, surrounded by documents representing 35 years of honest work, and for the first time since this crisis began, I felt hope, a fragile but unmistakable belief that truth might still matter. At 7:30 p.m., Ellie slid her key into the lock. When she stepped inside, Ethan's startled expression told her he had not expected her home so early. He was slouched on the couch, legal files scattered across the coffee table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his elbow. We need to talk, she announced, setting her purse down with surgical precision. Rough day? He asked without looking at her. The Barrett deposition got postponed again. I know about the conspiracy, Ethan. His head jerked upward, the polished courtroom mask he wore so effortlessly cracked, revealing fear and something darker underneath. What conspiracy? He replied too quickly. The one where you and my mother planned to financially cripple my father, she said, remaining on her feet. The one where you intended to use my professional credentials to support false allegations of abuse. I listened to the recording, every word. He placed his whiskey glass down with exaggerated calm. Ellie, I think you are misunderstanding. 25 years of playing the devoted wife. Her voice sliced through his denial. Does that sound familiar? The color drained from his face. Dan Thompson, who could argue before the state Supreme Court without blinking, now looked like a man staring at the wreckage of his entire life. How much did you hear? He whispered. Everything, she replied. The asset grab strategy, the timeline, your projected fees, every contemptuous remark you made about my father, about my family. She sat down across from him, posture rigid and professional. Tell me, Ethan, was our entire marriage part of this? 3 days later, Lauren discovered that social destruction could move far faster than any legal filing. The dining room at Summit Crest Country Club was alive with Saturday brunch chatter, but the moment she entered, small groups of women fell silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes turned away. Linda Patterson, her bridge partner of 5 years, suddenly became fascinated by her eggs Benedict. Susan Caldwell excused herself to take an urgent phone call. By the time Lauren reached her usual table, she realized that whispers had already spread. Lauren, dear, said Janet Crawford in a tone dripping with false sweetness. We missed you at the planning committee meeting yesterday. What meeting? I was never notified. Oh, that is strange. We had to make some organizational changes, Janet replied, smiling without warmth. I am sure you understand. The pattern became unmistakable. Phone calls unanswered, invitations quietly withdrawn, social doors closing with quiet precision. Lauren was learning that a reputation built on manipulation collapses the moment people sense the truth behind it. Meanwhile, I conducted my own campaign with significantly greater success. 35 years of ethical business dealings had earned me trust that no smear campaign could undo. My lunch with Tom Bradley at the bank was strategically productive. Over coffee, I explained, carefully and without drama, that there were serious family issues involving asset protection. Lauren and our son-in-law appear to have developed troubling plans regarding our property, I said. I have had to implement protective measures. Tom responded exactly as I hoped, with professional respect and genuine sympathy for a friend dealing with betrayal from his own household. That evening, the Chamber of Commerce Board met. And when Jim Caldwell asked about Lauren's absence from the recent fundraising dinner, I answered honestly. Some things have come to light about my marriage, I said quietly. It turns out that people are not always who you think they are. 25 years together, and I only recently learned what she was planning. I am grateful I discovered it when I did. By Sunday night, Lauren's social exile was complete. The membership committee at the country club scheduled a routine review of her status. The charity board accepted her resignation, one she had never submitted. Longtime friends politely distanced themselves, and Ethan's collapse matched hers. 3 major clients terminated their contracts, citing concerns about his judgment and ethical reliability. His professional life was evaporating as quickly as Lauren's social world. The consequences they had planned for me were now devouring them both. The Miller Industries account, nearly $200,000 in annual revenue, sent Ethan a formal letter on Sunday afternoon, stating that they had lost confidence in counsel's professional discretion. It was the kind of language corporations used when they wanted to sever ties quietly but decisively. That same night, I could hear Lauren's frantic call to Ethan through the thin walls of their apartment. Panic vibrated through every word. Everyone knows, Ethan. Everyone. I cannot show my face anywhere in this town. We will file emergency motions Monday morning, he snapped. We will force Richard into a defensive posture. Before what? She shot back. Before you lose your law license? Before I have to move in with my sister in Minnesota? Their blame game continued past midnight. 2 conspirators realizing that shared guilt did not translate into shared solutions. Tomorrow would be their final, desperate gambit. I was ready. Monday morning brought Lauren to the downtown office of attorney Linda Hawthorne, a divorce lawyer known for scorched earth tactics that earned her both an impressive reputation and equally impressive fees. The glass-walled conference room overlooked the county courthouse, the very place where Lauren hoped to dismantle my life. But Linda's expression suggested otherwise. Mrs. Cole, I have reviewed the documents you brought, Linda began, her voice carrying the cool professionalism of someone who had seen every possible marital disaster. Your husband's asset protection measures appear legally appropriate. Joint account holders may restrict access when marital discord surfaces. That is financial abuse, Lauren insisted, slipping in and out of her wounded persona. He is controlling every aspect of our money we earned together. Money he earned, Linda corrected gently, tapping a stack of tax returns. You have not had taxable employment outside the home since 1989. Your financial contribution appears minimal. Color rose in Lauren's cheeks. For decades, being a homemaker had symbolized security and privilege. Now, on paper, it resembled dependency. What about emotional abuse? She asked. What about intimidation? What specific incidents can you document? Linda asked, pen poised. Lauren hesitated. She had spent days trying and failing to construct a believable abuse narrative out of 25 years of genuine kindness. He has always been controlling with money. Can you provide examples of threats, physical intimidation? Has he ever prevented you from leaving the home, restricted communication, cut you off from family or friends? The silence answered for her. Richard Cole had never raised his voice, never isolated her, never restricted her life in any way. Her fabricated narrative was collapsing under the weight of its own emptiness. 10 blocks away, Ethan was learning that the State Bar Association could move with remarkable speed when misconduct appeared obvious. Monday morning's ethics committee call was far worse than contractor complaints. Mr. Thompson, the investigator said, we have received additional allegations involving misuse of client trust funds for personal expenses. pending resolution of these claims. These allegations are unfounded, Ethan said tightly. I have always maintained proper accounting procedures. We have documentation showing invoices submitted 8 months ago with repeated promises of payment pending client approval. Yet your client's settlement was finalized 6 months ago. A pause. Mr. Thompson, where are those funds now? In his personal checking account, where he had funneled them to cover rent, student loans, and office expenses. What he once considered cash flow management now looked like embezzlement. There may have been administrative delays. Mr. Thompson, a formal hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning. You are required to provide full trust account records for the past 18 months. By Wednesday evening, desperation had pushed both Lauren and Ethan past reason. Their emergency strategy session in Ethan's half-packed office felt like two generals planning a final assault, with no soldiers, no weapons, and no hope. We have to file domestic violence claims, Lauren declared, her voice sharp with false confidence. It is the only way to put him on the defensive. Lauren, false domestic abuse allegations carry felony penalties if they fall apart, Ethan warned. And given the evidence he probably has. What evidence? She snapped. Then the truth hit her like a blow. The recording. The one that started everything. That recording doesn't prove abuse, she insisted. It only proves we were discussing financial matters. So we reframe it, she continued. Your legal expertise, my testimony, we present the narrative as emotional manipulation and long-term financial control. Ethan stared at her across the empty conference table. 6 months earlier, she had been a bored housewife seeking excitement. Now she was suggesting perjury in family court, and likely felony charges if discovered. If this goes wrong, Ethan said slowly, we are both facing criminal prosecution. If we do nothing, she countered, I end up bankrupt and you end up disbarred anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting. Her voice carried the detached calculation of someone who had already lost everything, except the capacity to drag others down with her. Thursday morning's restraining order hearing would determine whether their last-ditch maneuver worked, or whether they had simply gift-wrapped more evidence of conspiracy for me to use against them. Neither Lauren nor Ethan had the slightest idea that I had spent the entire week documenting every call, every panicked meeting, every lie they fed to attorneys and friends. I was no longer merely defending myself. I was building a prosecution case. On May 1st, the Davenport County Courthouse felt different as I walked inside, steadier somehow, as if the reputation I had built over 35 years had turned into armor I carried with me. Judge Patricia Hendricks presided over domestic relations court with the kind of no-nonsense authority earned through decades of witnessing every variety of family treachery. Lauren sat at the plaintiff's table beside her hired attorney, Linda Hawthorne, dressed in a carefully curated battered spouse presentation. Conservative clothing, minimal makeup, a manufactured nervousness that might have been real given what she now faced. Mrs. Cole, Judge Hendricks began, reviewing the emergency petition. You allege that your husband has engaged in financial abuse and intimidation. Please describe the specific incidents that caused you to fear for your safety. Lauren's voice quivered with practiced fragility. Your Honor, for months my husband has been restricting my access to our accounts, monitoring my spending, and making threats about what would happen if I ever tried to leave. What kind of threats? Financial threats, Lauren said quickly. That I would be left with nothing, that he would use his business contacts to ruin my reputation. And last week, he cut off all my access to money, completely, even basic necessities. I watched the woman I had loved for 25 years perjure herself with growing confidence. Lie upon lie, stacked into a tower of fiction built from nothing but opportunism and betrayal. Judge Hendricks turned to my attorney, James Morrison. Does the defendant wish to respond? James rose slowly, the steady posture of a man who had practiced law for 3 decades without ever enabling dishonesty. Yes, Your Honor. We have evidence not only disproving Mrs. Cole's claims, but demonstrating that her petition is part of a deliberate conspiracy to defraud the defendant. A serious accusation, the judge noted. James continued without flinching. We have a 43-minute audio recording of Mrs. Cole and her co-conspirator, Daniel Thompson, planning this scenario 6 weeks prior. Color drained from Lauren's face. Linda Hawthorne leaned toward her client in a frantic whisper. But There was no saving a case built entirely on lies. "Exhibit A," James said, connecting his phone to the courtroom's speaker system. Lauren's own voice filled the courtroom. "When the old fool finally signs the papers, we will have everything we planned for." Judge Hendricks listened to the full recording. Every demeaning remark, every calculated legal strategy, every manipulative plan to weaponize Ellie's psychology credentials, every detail of their asset seizure blueprint. Then came the line that finally shattered Lauren's facade. "The man actually believes I love him." Her mask cracked in real time. The careful victim persona evaporated, replaced by raw panic. Judge Hendricks stopped the playback. "Mrs. Cole," she asked sharply, "do you have any response to this evidence?" Lauren's mouth opened, but no sound came. Linda Hawthorne's face had turned ashen. She understood she had just been unknowingly used to file fraudulent documents. "Your Honor," Linda said carefully, "I request permission to withdraw as counsel. My client did not disclose the existence of this recording." "Motion granted," Judge Hendricks said, then looked directly at Lauren with the hard stare she reserved for perjurers. "Mrs. Cole, I am dismissing your restraining order petition with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation of possible perjury charges." The strike of the gavel echoed through the room like a closing chapter. 2 weeks later, the divorce settlement reflected the consequences of Lauren's spectacular miscalculation. Her documented conspiracy wiped out any claim to spousal support. The prenuptial agreement she had signed eagerly back in 1987, an agreement she had completely forgotten, restricted her to minimal asset division. Meanwhile, Ethan's suspension from the bar became a full revocation when investigators uncovered $127,000 in missing client funds. Last I heard, he had moved to Nebraska and taken a job as a paralegal, one of the few legal positions available to disbarred attorneys. Ellie filed for divorce the morning after the hearing, citing irreconcilable differences. She is now building a new therapy practice specializing in family systems and manipulation recognition, skills she has earned through personal fire. 6 months later, Lauren is working retail at the same shopping mall where she once burned through my money on luxury items. The symbolism is not lost on either of us. As for me, I rebuilt Cole Construction's name stronger than ever. The community's support during those months translated into new business, deeper relationships, and an even stronger reputation for integrity. The house feels different now, quieter, but in a peaceful way. No more rehearsed conversations, no more calculated affection, just the sound of rain against windows I installed myself, in a home that finally feels honest again. Lauren had been right about one thing. I truly had believed she loved me. And now, for the first time in my life, I understand the difference between love and performance.